Shalom Torah Tribe, welcome to the channel that connects disciples of Yeshua to the eternal Torah of God. We are here back with you today for another special episode. I'm here with my wife, Sabrina, and we had a special episode a while back, a few weeks ago, that we talked about Rosh Hashanah. We didn't get a chance to talk about Yom Kippur, but we thought we'd go ahead and get together again and talk about Sukkot and let you guys join in on that and just go over some basics of Sukkot. I know Sukkot is new for a lot of you guys, and for some of you it may be a good review. So we thought we would bring this topic to you and just talk about it, talk about the scriptures that revolve around Sukkot and all the different things, how to observe it and different things like that. And so welcome, and I hope you enjoy this episode again. As a reminder, we're going to do the things a little bit different. Usually have a teleprompter, but we are going to be using hand printed notes, and I'll be using glasses and trying to be able to see and focus there. And my wife and I are going to tag team on this. So again, our topic is Sukkot, and let's just begin by giving a broad overview of what happens within the month of Tishrei, because Tishrei has a lot of holidays in it, and we talked about Rosh Hashanah last time, but we didn't really talk about what all else happened. So let's talk about that. As we talked about last time, the first and the second day of the month of Tishrei are Rosh Hashanah, or the biblical festival of Yom Teruah. That's what it's called in the Bible, okay? Then we have, on the 10th of Tishrei, we have Yom Kippur, the Day of Atonement. We just celebrated Yom Kippur. We just went through that process, the whole 25-hour fast, and it was very, very meaningful. We had a great service at our synagogue. And now we're coming up on the biblical festival of Sukkot. Now, Sukkot is from the 15th to the 22nd of Tishrei, okay? And so we're going to be talking primarily about that, but we're also going to be talking about a couple of other things that happen on the 23rd and the 24th of Tishrei that I'm not going to mention right now. I'm just going to let it come up, and we will deal with that as we come to it, okay? But the festival of Sukkot, or Tabernacles, is known by a couple of names. Of course, we just said Sukkot. We also said Tabernacles, but it's also called the Festival of Ingathering in the Bible. Okay, so Sukkot, of course, means tabernacles. You will also maybe hear the Hebrew expression Chag HaAsif, which is the Festival of Ingathering. And so this is another name. When you're reading in the Bible and you read at the Festival of Ingathering, it was talking about Sukkot. We're not talking about a separate festival, something else. Okay, and you may also hear about the booths that are built during Sukkot. They're called different names, and so what exactly is that? I mean, you'll hear people talk about tabernacles or booths or even huts, right? And so the word Sukkot actually means booths or tabernacles or huts or temporary dwellings, but the word Sukkah or Sukkah is the singular form of that. So when you go to build something, or somebody builds this temporary dwelling, it's not a Sukkot, but it's a Sukkah, okay? So that's the singular form. And it refers to really any kind of temporary shelter. There's some rules about how it is to be done that we're really not going to get into, because that's a deeper dive. What we are going to do is we're going to start by looking at the primary passages within the Torah that talk about Sukkot and what all's involved. Okay, so let's take a look at these. So we have 5 primary passages. The first one being Exodus 23:14 through 17. Okay, so let's read that together, and then we'll point out a couple of things about it. Exodus 23:14 through 17 says, 3 times in the year you shall keep a feast to me. This is the Lord talking to the children of Israel. You shall keep the feast of unleavened bread. As I commanded you, you shall eat unleavened bread for 7 days at the appointed time in the month of Aviv. For in it you came out of Egypt. None shall appear before me empty-handed. You shall keep the feast of harvest, of the firstfruits of your labor, of what you sow in the field. And this is also known as Shavuot or Pentecost. You shall keep the feast of ingathering. Here we have it right here. The Chag HaAsif, the Feast of Ingathering, at the end of the year, when you gather in from the field the fruit of your labor. 3 times in the year you shall all your males appear before the Lord your God. Okay, this is Exodus 23:14 through 17. So that's I guess these three things are pretty important then, right? So what are those?
Well, the 3 times a year that the Torah is talking about, it already said, but we'll go over it one more time. We have Passover, Pesach, and that's tied to Feast of Unleavened Bread, 7 days of that. And then we know the Omer is starting to be counted during the first day of the Feast of Unleavened Bread. And as you're counting up to 50, that's the next holiday. That's a pilgrimage holiday. And that's Shavuot, so Feast of Weeks or Festival of Weeks. And we also know it as Pentecost. So at Pentecost, the men would come to Jerusalem again. And then the third pilgrimage festival of the year, which is at the close of the year, is Sukkot, Feast of Tabernacles. In Hebrew, the term for these holidays that would be pilgrimage holidays is called Shalosh Regalim. Shalosh Regalim. Shalosh is the word for 3. Regalim is technically the word for legs, but it's the idea or idiom that you're walking, you're traveling by foot up to Jerusalem for these holidays. So Shalosh Regalim.
Shalosh Regalim. Very good. Thank you. The second passage is in Exodus 34, verses 21 through 24. It's pretty much the same as what we just read with some variances. It says, 6 days shall you work, but on the 7th day you shall rest. In plowing time and in harvest you shall rest. You shall observe the Feast of Weeks, the first fruits of the wheat harvest, and the feast of ingathering at the year's end. 3 times in the year, what we said just a moment ago, shall all your males appear before the Lord God, the God of Israel. For I will cast out nations before you and enlarge your borders. No one shall covet your land when you go up to appear before the Lord your God 3 times in the year. That's a pretty powerful promise, isn't it? Okay. This next passage is the big one. It gives more details of what's going on during this feast. And really, any biblical festival, if you go to Leviticus 23, you're going to find something related to that. It's the primary passages that relate to all of the festivals, right? So this is found in Leviticus 23, verses 33 through 43. This is what we read. And the Lord spoke to Moses, saying, Speak to the people of Israel, saying, On the 15th day of the 7th month, remember the month of Tishrei is the 7th month on the biblical calendar, and for 7 days is the Feast of Booths to the Lord. And this translation has it as the Feast of Booths, okay? On the first day shall be a holy convocation. You shall not do any ordinary work. For 7 days you shall present food offerings to the Lord. On the 8th day you shall hold a holy convocation and present a food offering to the Lord. It is a solemn assembly. You shall not do any ordinary work. I'm going to skip down to verse 39. On the 15th day of the 7th month, when you have gathered in the produce of the land, you shall celebrate the feast of the Lord 7 days. On the first day shall be a solemn rest, and on the 8th day shall be a solemn rest. And you shall take on the first day the fruit of splendid trees, branches of palm trees, and boughs of leafy trees, and willows of the brook. And you shall rejoice before the Lord your God 7 days. You shall celebrate it as a feast to the Lord for 7 days in the year. It is a statute forever throughout your generations. You shall celebrate it in the 7th month. Here's a detail we haven't gotten either. You shall dwell in booths for 7 days. All native Israelites shall dwell in booths, that your generations may know that I made the people of Israel dwell in booths when I brought them out of the land of Egypt. I am the Lord your God. Okay, now let's take a look at another passage. This is Deuteronomy chapter 16, verses 13 through 17. It says, You shall keep the feast of booths 7 days when you have gathered in the produce from your threshing floor and your winepress. You shall rejoice in your feast, you and your son and your daughter, your male servant and your female servant, the Levite, the sojourner, the fatherless, and the widow who are within your towns. For 7 days you shall keep the feast to the Lord your God at the place that the Lord will choose, because the Lord your God will bless you in all your produce and in all the work of your hands, so that you will be altogether joyful. 3 times a year all your males shall appear before the Lord your God at the place he will choose, at the feast of unleavened bread, at the feast of weeks, and at the feast of booths. They shall not appear before the Lord empty-handed. Every man shall give as he is able, according to the blessing of the Lord your God that he has given you. Okay, let's talk about that.
Well, there's an interesting part that the Torah says. God's instruction is to go to these pilgrimage festivals are to happen at the place that he will choose, the place that he will put his name. And so what is that place? So to answer that question, you may already know the answer, but I actually would like to read a passage out of the New Testament, or the apostolic writings, out of the Gospels, in Luke 2:41. It says, now his, meaning Yeshua or Jesus, now his parents went to Jerusalem every year at the feast of the Passover. So that's just a glimpse that, okay, it's Jerusalem, because that's where the Holy Temple was. So that's where the pilgrimage was too. And we said that earlier, but it's really neat when we can see the fulfillment, or the
Living out, see it actioned.
Yeah, just see the evidence of the Torah in action in the life of Yeshua and in the apostolic writings. So the Holy Temple is where these festivals are centered, and in the city of Jerusalem. Next, we want to move into the kind of some details about Sukkot. So in the passages Darren read, there are quite a few things that happen during this festival. And the first thing we're going to talk about is the instruction of taking up these different things that are listed, and we're going to talk about what they mean. So the first thing was fruit of the splendid tree.
Splendid tree is the way this translation.
Splendid tree. Sometimes it's beautiful tree.
Right. So in the actual Hebrew, it says Pari Eitz Hadar, which means literally the fruit of the beautiful tree.
Okay.
Okay. So what is that?
What is that? Because what's beautiful to me might not be beautiful to you.
Exactly.
So this is where we rely on Jewish interpretation and tradition to know what this fruit is. And I'll let you want to hold it, or
Sure.
you want to? Okay. So this is what we're talking about, and this is the citron, and in Hebrew it's referred to Etrog or Etrog. So this is, it may not look beautiful, it's kind of bumpy and wrinkly looking, but it does smell beautiful and splendid.
Yeah. Love it.
It is such a beautiful smell. So this is the first of these 4 things, 4 kinds, 4 species, if you will. The second one is the lulav. The lulav is a branch from a date palm. So here it is. It's long, and this comes from a date palm tree that produces dates. Okay.
All right. And makes a noise.
It makes noise when you shake it. The next one is boughs from a leafy tree. So these are...
And we have these still in the sealed packages that we've got these in, because Sukkot has not come yet, and so we want to keep these as good as we can, preserved as we can, because once they're opened, we start using them, they go quickly.
Right.
They start going bad.
So there are always, let me make sure I'm saying this correctly, there's always 3 of these, and these are our branches from the myrtle. Okay, so hadassim you've probably heard the name Hadassah.
Mm-hmm.
Hadassah. That means myrtle. So these are branches from a myrtle tree.
Okay.
And the last one is branches from the willow.
I see it that way.
So there are always two branches from the willow tree. Okay, and we're going to talk about each of these. In Hebrew, this is the aravot.
Did we talk about what these 4 together are called?
Okay, so together, there's 4 of them, and they're referred to as the Arba Minim. Arba Minim. Arba means 4. Minim is species or kinds. So these 4 things, 4 kinds, God tells us to take. And then what do? We get them, and then what do? So again, we follow what has always been done, and that is to shake them. They are shaken before the Lord, and typically in your sukkah, if you have a sukkah, or your community sukkah. If not, you can just do it at your home, in your yard, or somewhere that's maybe is special to you. It's also done in the synagogue every day during prayer time in the morning. So, so the taking of these 4 species, the Arba Minim, you shake them. You're going to shake them in 6 different directions. You're going to be facing the east, as is the custom for prayer and blessing. And so then you would be shaking them in all the directions. You've got south and north and east and west and up and down. And you would have your branches in your dominant hand and the Etrog in your non-dominant hand to do that. And there's some more details about that, but that's the general idea of what to do with that. What's interesting, though, is I remember first learning about this holiday, and it was just such a strange, odd thing. Why would God tell us to do that? Why did he tell Israel to do that? And so the sages have some different ideas of what this can teach us. But I like to say about this particular thing, it's one of those mitzvot or commandments in the Torah that remind me of what it's like when you're parenting. There are many times that you need to tell your children or your child to do something or to not do something. You don't have time to explain, or maybe they just don't need an explanation. You just need to give the instruction, and they need to listen and do it. And that's kind of how I see this instruction. It's like Hashem just says, take these 4 things, and this is what you do at this festival. And we don't really know why, but when we do it, it's like getting to just say, okay, Abba, okay, Father, I'll do it. I'll listen and I will obey. And there's a special blessing when you have that kind of childlike relationship with the Father, and just do what he says, whether you understand it or have the reasons or not. So think about that if you get to take up the 4 species at this holiday this year. So let's talk about a couple of ways you can look at these 4 species and get some deeper understanding and meaning from them.
And relate to them maybe a little bit.
And relate to them.
Yeah. So
each of them is said to represent a part of our body. So we'll go back to the Etrog. So the shape of the Etrog, you could guess, represents our heart. Okay? So we have to guard our heart. The desires of our heart can sometimes lead us astray. So with the instruction to take these, it gives us that idea of taking control. So we want to take control of our heart and the desires of our heart and not be led astray by our heart. The next, let's do the Lulav.
Okay.
Again, the date palm. This represents our spine, okay? Our backbone. And that's kind of obvious, but that is to remind us that we are to be upright and firm in our convictions and not to bend and compromise, but be steadfast.
That's good.
And the hadassim, the myrtle branches, if you can see the leaves, they have a shape to them. And the shape is representative of our eyes, okay? So our eyes are shaped similar to
Sort of almond shape, right?
Right? Similar to the leaves on the myrtle. And as you would guess, that is for us to guard our eyes, what we look at, and to also to what we see and perceive with our eyes. It's tied to our desires. And so if we are not content and thankful with our lot in life and what we have, and we use our eyes to see what we don't have and look at others, that the green-eyed monster, I call it, that jealousy can rear its ugly head. And so to guard our eyes and what we see and be careful with that is a good reminder.
Also, it's another sort of way to look at it, maybe, no pun intended, way to look at it. Mm-hmm. That's what it's all about, right? Mm-hmm. Is that we can either look with our physical eyes and see mm-hmm. things that we're confronted with and struggling with or whatever, or we can look through spiritual eyes. We can see what the Lord sees, try to see his perspective and say there's something greater here. There's mm-hmm. something beyond what our physical eyes can see.
Right. So the last one is the aravot, and that's the willow. And the leaves on the willow branches are elongated and thinner, and they are in the shape and represent our lips. So guarding our speech is one of
I'll show this one more
the...
so we can see it.
Yes.
Very good.
That is one of the greatest mitzvahs, and one of the hardest things to get control of is our tongue. But this is a good reminder that all of these things together represent us. And so when we're waving these before the Lord, shaking them, it's as if we're offering ourselves up to him. And it's just a beautiful picture. Mm-hmm. Another thing to think about is each of these they either have taste, smell, both, or neither. So the concept of taste and smell in Judaism has the symbolism of taste being Torah study and smell being the action or the fulfilling of that study in the mitzvot, in the commandments. So with the Etrog, the citron, the fruit, it has both taste and smell. So we want to be like that. And sometimes we are like that. We have Torah study and we have the actions to show that Torah study. Sometimes we're like the Lulav. The Lulav has taste but no smell because it produces dates, right? Mm-hmm. So it has fruit from that tree, and so there's taste but there's no smell. And sometimes we're like that. We have the study, but we don't always do the actions and fulfill it. And sometimes we are like the hadassah, the myrtle leaves, where we have no taste, but we have smell. And so we may not have a lot of knowledge, but we have a lot of deeds and a lot of actions. And mm-hmm. then sometimes we're like the willow that has no taste and no smell. And so the picture of this is that sometimes we are like each of these in our lives. And then also there are some people that are more like one or the other. Mm-hmm. But together, as we bring these together, there's still unity and there's a place for all of us exactly. in the family of God.
Right.
So those are some things about the 4 species. And I hope you get to experience that mm-hmm. this year. It may be too late, but maybe next year you can order a set for yourself, and there's places online you can find to do that and get a set of that
right.
to use.
And they try to time it where they get it to you either around Yom Kippur or right after.
Right.
So that's fresh when you get it.
Right.
Can you believe it? In just a few short weeks, we'll wrap up the book of Deuteronomy and start back in Genesis with a brand new Torah cycle. Now is the time to prepare for the new cycle by picking up a copy of one of the 5-minute Torah commentaries. I've had several people ask me what the difference between these books are. The difference is that they each contain unique Messianic commentaries on each of the weekly Torah portions. If you're looking for a quick, thought-provoking insight into the weekly Torah portions for your Shabbat table, your family devotions, your small group, etc., any of the volumes of 5-Minute Torah would be a perfect choice. And by purchasing a copy of these resources, you can help support this channel and the ongoing creation of quality Messianic resources. Thanks in advance for your support.
So let's move on to the next big component of this holiday, and that is the Sukkah. So the Sukkah, again, is the tabernacle, the booth, the temporary dwelling that the Torah is talking about building, constructing. And again, this is for the natives. The native Israelites are to do this every year, construct a sukkah.
At least required.
Right, required. So we won't go into great detail about this, but a sukkah, again, is to have at least 2 full walls and a third partial, if not full wall. And then it has a roof that's called a schak, and it's made of vegetation. And you want it to be, the vegetation to be, not be so thick that you can't see the stars through it. So you want to be able to sit in the sukkah, look up, and at least see some of the sky and some stars through it. And you can decorate your sukkah, the inside of your sukkah. And the Torah says to dwell in the sukkah. So to fulfill this, it is said you at least eat your meals in the sukkah.
And part of that reason is because that term, yoshev, to dwell, can also mean just to sit as well. Okay. And so that's part of that.
Okay.
Comes in how that comes into play.
So eating your meals in the sukkah for 7 days, and some people do even sleep in it. But it's at least eat your meals in the sukkah. And another custom is to invite guests, to invite people into your sukkah. It is a communal celebration, not just for you and your family, but for others. And it's a great time to invite others, your family, your friends, to come sit in the sukkah and eat a meal.
It's a very non-threatening time to get people engaged. We've had sukkah parties at our home for years and years, and it's always a place where people this is all new to, they're comfortable with, because you're outside, you're doing something outdoorsy. You may have a pit fire, a bonfire, or something going on, or whatever, one of the nights during the week, and people are just comfortable. They eat a meal, and sit around, sing songs, whatever.
Right. So with these ushpizin, that's the term for guests or visitors, there's a tradition that each night you are to invite one of the supernal guests, one of the forefathers of the Jewish faith. And I'll just list those 7 people that we know from the Bible: Abraham, Isaac, Jacob, Moses, Aaron, Joseph, and David. So each night you have one of those guests that you can read about and learn about. Another really, really, really neat component of this festival that they're reenacting today, even today in Jerusalem through the Temple Institute, they're reenacting this, but in the ancient times, this was every year. There was a part of this festival was the water drawing ceremony. So in Hebrew, that's called the Simchat Beit HaSho'evah. So every night there would just be this big parade type dancing and singing, and this entourage going down to the pool of Siloam. They had a golden pitcher. They would get water and bring it back up. And then on the 7th day of the festival, that is a special time as well with this whole water drawing ceremony process. I wanted to read a few some descriptions of this, because it is said that if you have not been at the water drawing ceremony, you've not seen joy.
Right. So I'm going to clarify just real quick. So the Simchat Beit HaSho'evah, we didn't really say what it meant. So Simchat Beit HaSho'evah means the rejoicing of the house of the water drawing. I mean, that's a loose translation, but that's what it is. And so it's rejoicing, and it is the ceremony of the water drawing that they, like you said, they go down the pool of Siloam with the golden pitcher, they get the water, they dance all the way back up to the temple, and then they pour the water out on the altar, right?
Right. So why water? Well, all of these festivals are tied to agriculture. We don't see that so much today because of our, modern practices, but in ancient times, everything was centered around agriculture and that cycle. And so to grow things, we have to have water. We have to have rain. And so this is where it's at the end of this festival, we'll talk about in a little bit more, but that we begin to pray for rain. Mm-hmm. We don't pray for rain. Before that, there's a certain period of the year we don't pray for rain, but then we do begin to pray for rain when it's needed. And so this is that time. So I wanted to read a few things to set the scene of this very joyous, just great joy, great rejoicing at the Beit HaSho'evah. So there were, again, I said there was a golden pitcher that they used, and there were trumpets, a shofar was sounded. Let me just read this, okay? He that has never seen the Simchat Beit HaSho'evah, the joy of the water drawing, has never in his life seen joy. There were golden candlesticks there, with 4 golden bowls on the top of them. The candlesticks were 50 cubits high. 50 cubits high.
Pretty high.
We'll have to find out exactly how high that is and put on.
I think it's about 75 feet.
Okay, really
75,
high.
80 feet.
4 ladders led up to each candlestick, and 4 youths from the priestly stock went up holding in their hands jars of oil, 24 logs capacity, and they were poured into the bowls. Then they made wicks out of worn-out garments of the priests, and with them they set the candlesticks alight. And there was not a courtyard in Jerusalem that did not reflect the light of the Beit HaSho'evah. Men of piety and good deeds used to dance before them with burning torches in their hands, singing songs and praises. Countless Levites played on harps, lyres, cymbals, and trumpets, and other instruments of music on the 15 steps leading from the court of the Israelites to the court of the women. 2 priests stood at the upper gate, which leads down from the court of the Israelites to the court of the women, with 2 trumpets in their hands. Okay, and then it goes on to talk about all of the trumpet blowing that happened. And it was related of Rabban Shimon ben Gamliel in the Talmud. When he was rejoicing with the joy of the water drawing, he would take 8 burning torches in one hand and toss them upwards. He tossed one and caught one, and never did one touch the other. So here we have what I would say probably the original fire juggler. and just, if you could picture what a sight to be able to see all of this going on in the temple complex, and just wow. So this again is called Hoshana Rabbah. It's the 7th day of the festival and the last day, because Sukkot is 7 days long. We have another really cool reference that Darren's going to talk about that will help. Knowing all this about Sukkot, the water drawing ceremony, what was happening on the 7th day, Hoshana Rabbah, is going to cause this passage to really come to light.
Okay, so in the Gospel of John, we have Yeshua going up to the Holy Temple again. As we read, his family went up there. He went up there year to year at festival to festival and everything. John chapter 7, he goes up for Sukkot. Okay, and in John 7, verses 37 and 38, we read, on the last day of the feast, okay, on the great day, Yeshua stood up and cried out, "If anyone thirsts, let him come to me and drink. Whoever believes in me, as the scripture has said, out of his heart will flow rivers of living water." Powerful, powerful. So the last day, Sukkot, is 7 days long. What day is Hoshana Rabbah? It's the seventh day. And what does Hoshana Rabbah mean?
Great salvation.
Yeah, the great salvation, or the great save us, okay? And it says, on the last day, on the great day. Okay, so very clear picture of what day Yeshua did this, if you know what's going on, if you know the scriptures, right? Of this. So we have a really neat connection there.
Yes, very much. So that's pretty much Sukkot. But the Torah passages we read talks about this extra 8th day. That's another thing that's happening.
So you have 7 days. It says celebrate Sukkot for 7 days. And then on the 8th day, it's also a Sabbath of sorts. You're to do no normal work, ordinary work, and you're to have a holy convocation, right? It sort of separates this out. What's that all about?
Okay. So this is the holiday called Shemini Atzeret. And it literally means 8th assembly. 8th, and it's the 8th day assembly. So after Sukkot, we actually have a separate little holiday that's just one day in Israel that's tacked on at the end. And we just say Sukkot and it kind of gets lumped in with that. We don't always say both names, but we do know that it is a holiday in and of itself. And it is, that's all we know. The Torah just says assemble, and so the sages liken it unto that extra time, that extra special time that Hashem wants you to linger with him, just one extra day. And we don't have time to go into it, but all of these festivals paint a picture of a marriage motif of God and his bride Israel. And if you will, the Festival of Sukkot, the 7 days, is likened unto like the honeymoon. And that last day is that just one more day, like before we have to, go into normal life, like, look, can we just have one more special intimate day together? And that's really what Shemini Atzeret is about. Now, in Israel, it is celebrated alongside with Simchat Torah. And that celebration means joy of the Torah. And that is when the Torah scrolls are brought out and they're processed, and there's, again, great joy and singing and dancing, and then the Torah scrolls are opened and rolled.
Well, we read the last.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Read the very last Torah portion, because unless you do this, that last Torah portion often gets lost. Right. So, V'zot HaBracha, the last Torah portion, we read it, open up the scrolls, read it, and then what?
Then we roll.
You
start rolling back, and then you read out of Genesis as well, so that there's never a gap. There's never this space between the beginning and the end, or the ending and the beginning. So there's always an overlap. So Simchat Torah happens on Shemini Atzeret in Israel. Outside of Israel, there are 2 separate days and 2 separate holidays, or 2 separate days. So you would do that, what would be considered the 9th day. So the 8th day, Shemini Atzeret, Simchat Torah would be the 9th day outside of Israel, and that's when you would bring the Torah scrolls out, finish reading the Torah, roll it back, and then begin it anew.
And this time is like it's called Simchat Torah, right? It's not just the restarting of the Torah, but it's the joy of the Torah. And this is a party, Okay, this is a time of great rejoicing. A lot of dancing in the synagogues and parading the Torah scrolls and all that kind of stuff. And it's rejoicing that we have completed, we have endured and held the course for a whole year to study Torah, and we get to start it again.
Yes.
Okay? And so it's a big time of great rejoicing.
Yes. So this whole season is referred to as the season of our joy. There was a little passage in these scriptures that Darren read that actually it is commanded to rejoice. It's not just suggested, but it's considered a commandment that you must rejoice at this holiday. And so it is referred to as the season of our joy.
With the commandment there, the phrase is it reads as and you shall be joyful or something like that, but it can also be read and you shall only be joyful. Okay? And so that is where the commandment comes in. Okay? And so sometimes we think, well, how can we be joyful if we're not happy, if things are bad or whatever? And that's where Hashem is saying, hey, you've got to take charge over your emotions. You've got to take charge over what makes you happy and what doesn't. And this is where I think we're disciples of Yeshua, anyone who follows Torah, we are separate and different from the world in the sense that God determines our joy, not our circumstances. Our relationship with the Lord determines our joy and not our circumstances. And so I think this is huge.
This holiday, as the Torah says, it is to remind us of when God took Israel out of Egypt and then he started providing for them. And he provided them food, he provided water, we know their shoes didn't run out. They had a cloud by day, a fire by night, watching over them, protecting them, leading them. So Hashem's presence was with them greatly in the desert or in the wilderness. And as they did have to live in tents, they didn't have a home yet. They were wandering for 40 years. But the Lord provided for them. He was their refuge. And that's the picture when we sit in the Sukkah. It's a time to look back on our lives, on our personal lives. Definitely look at what God did for Israel and what he has continued to do for Israel throughout these millennia. But look at our own personal lives. How has he provided for you?
How has he been faithful?
How has he been faithful? What are the miracles in your life that you can testify and recall and recount? And so it's just a time to, even though we're sitting in a temporary dwelling, which reminds us how short and temporary this life is, we can know that we're in the shelter of the Almighty and that he is our provision and he meets our needs, he sees our needs, and we can depend on him. He's faithful and dependable.
That's exactly right. Well, I think we're going to wrap it up, but thank you guys for joining us for another one of these special episodes of us discussing the holidays. And so thank you again for sticking around. If you haven't checked out our last one on Rosh Hoshana, even though Rosh Hoshana is past, you can watch it and prepare for next year and know what it's all about. But thank you again, and we will see you again soon with another Messianic insight into the eternal Torah of God. Blessings from Emet HaTorah.
Chag Sameach.
Chag Sameach.